It was a cold December night, Christmas Eve. My family and I were gathered around the table for dinner. The room was cozy, illuminated by the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree. The table was bountiful, decorated with candles and dishes that exuded inviting aromas. My wife, Clara, as always an excellent cook, had prepared our favorite dishes, roast turkey, pies, and a variety of delicious desserts. Our two children, Miguel and Sofia, were radiant. Miguel, at 7 years old, could hardly sit still, eager to open the presents under the Christmas tree. Sofia, older and contemplative, looked at everything with a sweet smile, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. At that moment, we were immersed in a prayer of thanksgiving. My life had not been easy over the years, so I had learned early on to be grateful and to value the few things I possessed. We were all holding hands, expressing our gratitude for another year together. We gave thanks for the bountiful food on the table, for our health, for the achievements, and for the lessons learned. My voice mingled with the murmurs of my children and my wife, who agreed, saying Amen. It was then that an unexpected sound echoed, abruptly cutting through the serenity of that moment. It was the doorbell. An untimely interruption that made Clara frown. "Who could it be at this hour?" she muttered, clearly irritated. We weren't expecting visitors, and the idea of someone interrupting that sacred moment seemed almost sacrilegious. I then got up calmly and went towards the door. It was almost midnight, and the moon shone in the clear winter sky. I walked down the dark hallway, the lights from the Christmas tree cast dancing shadows on the walls. The festive atmosphere of the house contrasted with the silence outside. Upon opening the door, the cold December wind hit me, bringing with it a shiver that ran down my spine. There, in the dim light in front of me, was a girl. She must have been around 7 years old, the same age as my son Miguel. Her clear, large, and shiny eyes met mine, fixing her pitiful gaze on me. Her clothes were extremely dirty, her sweater was torn, making it inappropriate for the harshness of that winter night. I couldn't help but think about how she was enduring the intense cold with so little protection. The sleeves of her sweater were already short, as if she had grown since the last time she had been dressed warmly. Her pants were thin and old, and her fingers revealed the cruel embrace of winter. On her face, her pale skin made it clear that she hadn't eaten in hours or maybe days. That girl, that poor girl in front of me, was a mirror of my own childhood, a time of difficulties and challenges that I had also gone through. It was then that I broke down in tears. I was only 8 years old when my mother passed away, a victim of a heart attack. I never knew my father, and my closest aunt, also without many means, never planned to adopt me. I went through various local orphanages that were supposed to be a refuge but often turned out to be real hells. Then, one night, tired of the suffering and loneliness, I decided to run away. With nowhere to go, I began living on the streets. I remember the painful cold nights, the empty stomach, the constant search for a safe place to sleep. During the day, I tried to get by in every possible way, looking for jobs at street fairs and taking advantage of fruits and leftovers that were left behind. And it was on a Christmas night, much like this one, that the reality of my situation hit me with full force. I hadn't been able to find any work in the past few days, and the street fairs hadn't operated due to Christmas Eve. I had been without food for 2 days. My stomach ached from hunger, and the freezing cold burned my skin. Normally, I slept alongside other children and some adults who were also homeless, but that night seemed much colder than usual. From a distance, I would watch families gathered in their homes, happy and warm. Oh, how I missed my mother. She always tried to make our Christmases special, even with few resources. In the week leading up to that Christmas, rumors were circulating that a Santa Claus would be distributing toys in a neighborhood not far from where we were. My eyes and those of my friends lit up with the news, dreaming of a present that, for a brief moment, could dispel the harshness of our days. Our hearts were racing with our hurried steps as we ran in search of Santa Claus. In my mind, I sketched the outlines of toys, trying to imagine what they would look like. I longed for a ball to kick against the gray walls of the world, perhaps to find an imaginary goal that would mark a turning point in my life. A toy car would also bring me joy. I imagined its wheels spinning fast, taking me far away from there, to a place where hunger and cold were just distant memories. But reality was impatient to teach its cruel lesson. When we arrived, the air was heavy with the echo of laughter that was not ours, and Santa Claus, the mythical figure of kindness and generosity, was turned away from us, leaving with no presents remaining. Our smiles quickly dissolved into tears. With the innocence of my few years, the weight of disappointment fell on my shoulders. A ball or a toy car was more than just toys. They were keys to a world where I could momentarily forget my troubles and just be a child. Rebellion bubbled inside me, a confused mix of feelings that I could barely understand. Why? I wondered. Why can't I have the warmth of a home and the certainty of presents like other children? My mind swirled with questions I didn't know how to answer. Did I do something wrong? Am I being punished? I just wanted to understand why my life was so different, so full of struggle and so empty of toys and laughter that seemed so easy for others. The thoughts spun in my head like a broken carousel, without music or lights, just the grating sound of questions with no answers. Why me? The question echoed, and with each repetition, it weighed more on my small heart. After that fateful day, the way I saw life changed. The innocence that used to be the companion of my youth gave way to disillusionment. Reality was a strict teacher, and the lessons were harsh. The world, I realized, was not fair, at least not to me. On the streets, I felt the looks of people, looks that did not hide their disgust. I had become invisible, except when fear made them clutch their bags a little closer as I passed. But misery did not corrupt me. I never took what wasn't mine. It was my mother who taught me the value of honesty, always saying that the little we have must be earned with dignity. My pride, though fractured by circumstances, remained intact, a legacy of the most valuable lesson she left me. I survived with what I could find, with the scraps of food the streets offered me. But there was also kindness in some hearts. Secretly, restaurant workers, against their boss's orders, would give me what was left of the day's banquets. However, on that specific Christmas day, I had not yet managed to find anything to eat. When despair had already darkened my hope, a miracle happened. With an empty stomach and a heavy heart, I started knocking on doors, begging for any leftover food. Most ignored my pleas, some with empty excuses, others with silence. Until, in one of many attempts, finally a door opened. In front of me was a child, a living contrast to everything I aspired to be, clean, with new and well-arranged clothes, clearly nourished by more than just food but also by the love and security of a home. His eyes widened at the sight of me, as if seeing a child so different from him was unimaginable. For a moment, there was a silence loaded with mutual surprise. Then, with a gasp of shock, he turned and ran to find his parents. His hurried steps echoed against the floor like the beating of an anxious heart. As the child disappeared down the corridor, my eyes wandered through the interior of the house, drawn by the colorful light of the Christmas tree. Dozens of presents, wrapped in shimmering paper with perfectly tied bows, awaited under the green branches. The soft glow of the decorations danced in my retinas, and for a moment, I allowed myself to drift into a sweet and painful daydream. I closed my eyes, imagining myself in that child's place, touching, feeling, and opening each present, discovering toys and wonders that filled each box, each one unveiling a new reason to smile. However, I was quickly brought back to reality by the soft and inquisitive voice of a woman. When I opened my eyes, I found myself looking at her, a gentle presence, with hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders and eyes that reflected a mixture of concern and compassion. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it pity or understanding? Her hands were adorned with delicate rings, but her gaze was firm, conveying a strength that only true empathy can offer. She asked with a voice that carried the warmth of a hug. My voice hesitated, the words tangled in my throat as I asked for any scraps of food I could take for myself, and the friends waiting for me on the cold street corner. Her gaze softened even more, and she nodded affirmatively. "Wait here," she said with a voice that carried the promise of a generous heart. And there, standing on that threshold between abundance and want, I waited, sustained by a thread of hope. When she returned, she was holding a bag full of food containers. My heart almost stopped, the smell was divine, and I could hardly wait to share that feast with my friends. I thanked her and ran off, but her voice called me back. "Boy, wait." Confused, I turned around. She was holding a gift box in her hands, extended towards me. The surprise made me freeze for a moment, and a tear instantly rolled down my cheek, overflowing with emotion. It was the best Christmas since my mother had passed away. It was a cold December night, but at that moment, my heart was warm with a smile I couldn't contain. I thanked that generous-hearted woman and ran back to my friends, holding the bag tightly like a treasure. When I arrived, they surrounded me with eyes shining with anticipation. Together, we opened the bag and marveled at the food inside. We devoured each container with a ravenous hunger, a hunger only those who have known need can understand. For a moment, the pains of hunger and cold were forgotten, replaced by the joy of a meal shared among friends. Next, it was time to open the present. All eyes were fixed on me, full of curiosity and excitement. With trembling hands, I tore off the wrapping paper and revealed a toy. It was a ball. Shouts of joy echoed that night, breaking the cold silence with our happiness. For a magical moment, all our worries dissipated, and we were just children laughing, playing, and living in the now, forgetting the hardships each of us faced. That Christmas night became a refuge of happiness, a rare gift of normalcy in our tumultuous lives. The next morning, the sun seemed to shine with a different intensity, as if celebrating the change in my life. Holding the ball I had received the night before, I felt genuine joy, a kind of happiness I hadn't experienced in a long time. The week passed, and one day, I saw her again, the kind woman who had transformed my Christmas night. She was accompanying her son to school, and when our eyes met, she recognized me and waved with a sweet smile. I returned the wave, a small gesture that seemed to seal an invisible connection between us. Later, she returned and found me on the same street. I was helping an old man at his fruit stand. She approached and invited me for a conversation in a quieter place. Without hesitation, I accepted, and we sat together in a nearby cafe. As we talked, I felt a wave of kindness and gentleness emanating from her. She made me feel special, as if I really mattered. She asked about my life, and I shared my story with her. I talked about my mother, the challenges I faced on the streets, and how I managed to find food. As I spoke, I saw her eyes fill with tears. I tried to reassure her, saying that I was getting used to that life, but she shook her head, clearly touched and outraged by my situation. It was then that she made me an offer I could never have imagined. She asked if I would like to live with her and her family. She explained that her house was large and that her son, a lonely boy, longed for a brother. She herself could no longer have children, but something in her compelled her to take a chance with me, to offer a home to a poor street boy. When she made the proposal, I was completely paralyzed. For an instant, reality seemed distant, and doubt settled in my mind. Could she really be serious? The possibility of living with her, of having a home, sounded so surreal that for a moment I thought it might be a cruel joke. I feared taking a step forward and discovering that it was all just an insensitive game. I stood there, motionless, looking at her, trying to read the sincerity in her eyes. Then, she broke the silence. Her words dissipated any trace of doubt. "You won't regret it, dear. I can take care of you like a son. I can see the kindness in your eyes, and that's why I want to help you." Those words were like a bomb, and without further hesitation, my answer was a yes. A firm and grateful yes. Although the thought of leaving my friends on the streets weighed on my heart, the opportunity before me was like a beacon in the midst of a storm. She radiated kindness and compassion, and in that moment, I decided to trust her and embrace this wonderful chance that life was offering me. As I followed the woman through the streets, my heart beat with a mix of anxiety and expectation. When we arrived at her house, I was impressed. The residence was large and welcoming. There, she took care of me, offered me a hot bath and clean clothes that belonged to her son. As I dressed, I felt a lightness I hadn't known for a long time. It was as if a gigantic burden had been lifted from my shoulders, giving way to a new beginning, a future full of possibilities and love. In the following months, she took care of the adoption process, and I officially became part of that family. She not only gave me a home but also changed my life. Now, 36 years after that night that changed my life, I found myself in a moment of profound déjà vu. In front of me, a girl was waiting at the door, a living mirror of my own story. She was not just a child seeking help, she was the personification of my past, an opportunity to repay the kindness that once saved my life. With the decision made in my heart, I didn't hesitate. I welcomed that little girl into my home and offered her a delicious hot meal. As she ate, I could see the relief in her eyes with each bite. Afterwards, when she had finished eating, my wife took her to the bathroom so she could have a bath. I then took the opportunity to set aside some clothes that belonged to my daughter. I felt immersed in a deep joy for being able to help. I remembered my adoptive mother, imagining that she must have felt the same joy when she took me in. Helping that girl was more than a simple act of charity, it was an act of rescue, an echo of what had been done for me. Today, that girl has become our adopted daughter, Katarina. Unfortunately, Katarina lost her biological family in a war in Serbia, her homeland. She managed to escape and emigrate with her paternal grandmother, but sadly, her grandmother passed away during that journey. By a twist of fate, or perhaps a higher design, it was our door that Katarina knocked on. By opening the door for her, I was able to repay the kindness that fate once granted me. That night, once again, Christmas proved to be a milestone in my life. It was a reminder of how kindness and compassion can transform lives. Today, I carry with me not just memories, but a powerful legacy, a legacy of making a difference in people's lives, of reaching out when someone needs it, just as others did for me. It is estimated that around 55 million children worldwide live on the streets. Be a light in the darkness for one of them. Help make each Christmas prosperous and memorable for everyone. Thank you for watching. Comment below what you thought of this story and where you are watching from. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so that together we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories. See you next time.